Item 4, we're going to go with invocation by Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we come today asking you for your guidance, wisdom, and support. As we begin this meeting, help us to engage in meaningful discussion on behalf of the residents of Macomb County, and continue to remind us that all that we do here today, all that we accomplish, is for the residents of Macomb County. Please let us all keep the men and women and their families serving our great country in our prayers. We ask these things through your Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. Item number 5, adoption of the agenda. I need a motion to adopt. Commissioner Carabelli, supported by Commissioner Drollet. Please vote. Motion passes. Item number 6, approval of the minutes dated October 18, 2018. Motion to approve. Commissioner Toko, supported by Commissioner Duge. Motion passes 13-0. Item 6B, motion to adopt minutes dated October 22nd, 2018. Commissioner Kraft, supported by Commissioner Romano. Please vote. Motion passes 13-0. Item number 7, public participation, 5 minutes maximum per speaker. Keeping in mind, we still have in mind what you just said from the last meeting. We have any members of the public wishing to speak? Any members of the public wishing to speak? Third and final time, we're going to close public participation. Move to item number 8, correspondence from the Office of County Executive. We don't have any, except for his recommended budget, which we'll talk about on item number 9. Recommendations to November 8th full board. Resolution 2018-2321, adopting a fund balance policy to guide budget adoption. I need a motion to move that to full board on November 8th. Commissioner Leonetti, supported by Commissioner Romano. We have some speakers on this. I would like to actually ask Jen DeHaan to speak to this. Now, keep in mind, all of this is being moved to next Thursday's meeting, so you'll
That's all I wanted to speak
you'll have
to.
a whole week to absorb this. Any changes, items that you see that might need to be tweaked, or we can talk about them today. But this is not going to be adopted today. It's going to be recommended to move to next Thursday. So I want to point that out. Commissioner Brown's microphone, Ms. DeHaan.
Yes, thank you. The fund balance policy that's been put in front of you today is for your consideration to assist in the budget adoption and consideration process. This is brought to you as a result of the past couple of years. The annual budget has utilized fund balance to balance the annual budget. And fund balance is meant to assist the board and the county in addressing unexpected situations or unexpected expenses that may occur throughout the year, whether it's due to state or federal funding that may not be realized, or unexpected expenses or emergency situations. At the end of fiscal year 2018, it's projected that the fund balance level will be about 17.5% of the fiscal year 2019 budget. The fiscal year 2019 budget further recommends drawing down the fund balance by approximately $8.8 million. That will leave the board with a fund balance at approximately 14%. The Government Finance Officers Association and the Government Accounting Standards Board and the Generally Accepted Accounting Principles recommend that counties adopt these policies to guide the budget process. The policy that's in front of you today defines what fund balance is, and there's been a lot of discussion in the past about what do we count as fund balance, and there's been different numbers thrown around. And so this is really meant to help the board understand in the best way possible what those numbers are comprised of. It says what it's going to be calculated on. There's been different numbers thrown around. And then it presents for your consideration the minimum goals to be between 15 and 20% of the annual total expenditures, including the transfers out. All of this is based upon the best available information that the board has received from the finance department, whether it be through a public meeting or also in our communication. And so this is something to start to guide the process and to help you as you deliberate the annual budget, and so what you can expect as you're moving forward.
Thank you. We have some commissioners. Commissioner Kleinfeld?
I just wanted to say, as we're moving it forward, these documents, because they were being worked on all week, weren't finalized until today, so all of us will need the time to go through them. And I just wanted to make that clear that we haven't gone through them yet in great detail. Thank you.
Thank you. And that being said is why we're doing it this way. Last year, we would have got them about today based on the general process, and we would have been voting on it today. So this time we have a week in between to discuss both potential amendments and these policies. And these policies are board policies for the board to guide us in our deliberation with the budget. These aren't policies that hold anybody else to any specific standard. These are our own policies for our board to look at. So Commissioner Duge, you're up on next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, basically you're addressing my question. Has this been, has the Office of County Executive taken a look at this, or Corporation Counsel or anything? Or is this strictly just this board policy?
Commissioner, right now, this is our board policy that we are going to hopefully adopt to guide us in future budget operations. Everybody, including us, are really just getting a look at it for the first day. They will get a look at it. Steve will have it. The executive's office will have it. And we'll have a week.
All right.
And it's online. I'm sorry. It's online actually right now, too.
Okay,
so.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody up and down the line is aware of
Yes.
this document, and everybody will have input into it.
We have taken the suggestions of prior years and tried to address them by doing something like this and extending the budget process by a week, which
That's actually a very, very good idea as far as I'm concerned. Well done. Thank you.
Commissioner Drollet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jen, I suppose. What are some of the dangers of fund balance dropping below certain thresholds? Is there some generally accepted minimums that should be minimum fund balances that should be kept? Who determines what that is, and what are some of the consequences of not abiding by that?
Go ahead. You can answer that, sure.
The rule of thumb is equivalent to 2 months of the operating expenditures, which is how you come up with between 15 and 20% amount of fund balance. There's bond rating agencies, when they look at the county in terms of its fiscal stability, often look at the fund balance that's available, and the county's bond rating is very important to future projects and long-term capital planning and infrastructure that's developed or maintained. So that's one significant consequence that can occur. It can cost taxpayers more money if the bond rating is dropped because the fund balance is deemed to be that critical of an element. Obviously, responding to emergency situations or unexpected situations is another one if the county doesn't have dollars available. If the state, as they have historically done, although it's been better the past few years, has been slow in adopting their budget or in transferring dollars to the county, sometimes there are cash flow issues. I know that Macomb County is very solid in terms of its cash flow, but that is also one of the considerations that local units of government take into consideration.
Thank you. Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. Just to kind of piggyback on what Misty Hunt has said, we have had cities within Macomb County that have had applied some very difficult situations financially, and as a result, they've had to be taken over. And part of that situation was when they started their bond rate, when they start to borrow money or try to borrow money to get out of that situation, and the people look at their fund balance that are lending this money and say, wait a minute, you don't have the money to start off with, your fund balance is way low, you want money from us for bonds, it's going to cost you this much more in interest if in fact we're going to give it to you for your good faith in repaying us. So having that fund balance at the recommended balance or figure is something that's extremely important to not only to us as a county, but every city and municipality in the state. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I will say that by all means, this county is in very good financial shape, and our use of fund balance over the years has been anticipated and calculated to bring it down to a certain level while still fixing some capital project issues that need to be taken care of. This is more of a guide for the board and future boards on how we look at things. And this is recommended not only by all of the accounting standards, but by our audit firm, Plant Moran. We've talked to them several times, and this is their recommended manner in which to look at, the way to look at general fund balance. So I don't have any, Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, and I forgot to bring this up earlier, under our board rules or under our comprehensive general appropriation ordinance, which we'll be discussing, can we, and where would this be to put limits on bonding? Where we have certain dollar figures that we can bond for, and once you reach that limit, we give our capabilities to other departments, communities, of using our, I forgot the word, full faith and credit of the county. And this was a discussion we brought up earlier, and I apologize for not mentioning this to you, but where would that be, can it be, should it be implied in here, or is this something that we should take a look at and attack later?
Jim, if you could answer, but I'd also say if something like this can be done, we have a week to discuss this also about where it should be put, if it should be put. But
And if
you have
we
a
should,
short
or if we
answer to
can,
that.
or if it's just
Your indebtedness is limited by state law as to how much the county could go into debt for bonding for that purpose. So this would be considered separate from that, although they would look at this as a security for that bond in terms of the fund balance.
And I agree with what you're saying, but it's also when we use our full faith and credit for other departments such as the drain office, and they're borrowing money. Right, okay, all right, thank you, thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
Mr. Smigiel, yes.
So, in terms of our total debt limit, so the state law limits our total debt load to being 10% of our taxable value. Actually, SEV, we use taxable. So our taxable value is about $27.1 billion. So so you're talking a debt limit of $2.7 billion. We've got $600 million. We're nowhere close to our limit. However, I've mentioned to you before that the rating agencies look at our debt profile in terms of how much our debt is as a percentage of revenues and all those sorts of things. So you've asked me before, where we stand and how much we can issue before we maybe get in a little bit,
It hurt our rating for borrowing money.
possibly hurt our rating, because there's a matrix that they use when they rate us or determine our debt profile. And so there's a little room there to issue some debt, and we take that into account when we either, pledge our full faith and credit or go out for new debt issues. So we're not close to our legal debt limit, but we're close to a point where it's possible we could, in that one scoring category, could get a tick down. It may not affect our total score because that category is only 10% of the total score.
But eventually it could
Yeah.
affect us.
I mean, if you
Okay,
keep issuing more and more and more and more and more, then it could become an issue. But we take that into account when we deal with, potential refundings or new issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majek.
Yeah, just through the chair to Mr. Schmiegel, I thought you mentioned we can take on about 25 million more in debt before we could be negatively affected by that.
I think it
My
was
recollection from
somewhere just north of 100 million.
100 million, that
Yeah,
much?
Yeah.
Okay. so
Based on the matrix that Standard & Poor's used in our last rating.
Okay. I do support this resolution, but I think just from the big picture, the reason why we have to support a resolution like this is because we're taking money out of our fund balance and putting it into capital projects, and obviously that's doing two things. That's putting us in jeopardy as far as our funding balance goes, and puts us into deficit as well. So I think that's the big picture we need to think of. In my personal opinion, I know it's not speaking to this resolution directly, is those capital projects have to be controlled. We can't pass budgets that are not balanced. That's the main job for any government entity, is to balance your books. And when it's not balanced, we have to figure it out and do the homework and get it working right. So, but I think that gets into the essence of our fund balance of what's going on there. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Steve. That matrix you talked about with respect to the debt, is included in that matrix fund balance?
That is not in the debt profile matrix. It's one of the 7 scoring categories.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, they call it budget flexibility, but basically it's fund balance.
Okay, and do they have a general standard before they start ticking downward on that?
15%.
15 to 20.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you. I don't have any other speakers, but I will say the biggest reason I think for this type of a policy is for the board to have some consistency. You know, year to year, we've gone, in finance, and the executive's office wants the same thing for our county that we do, and that's financial stability. So I don't think for one second that the budgets that they propose to us have anything other than that in mind, and we've talked capital projects for years. I'm looking at this more as a board consistent policy that we live by year to year, which then everybody knows what to expect from where we're going with our budget process. So with that being said, I don't have any other speakers. We're going to vote on 9A. The motion is to forward to full board on November 8th. Okay, motion passes 13-0. Item 9B, Resolution 2018-2322, adopting a capital improvement plan funding policy. Need a motion to forward that to the November 8th full board. Commissioner Lucido, support by Commissioner Drollet. Please.
Thank you. This also is similar to the fund balance policy. It is a capital improvement funding policy meant to provide information and standards for the board so that you know what to expect when you're reviewing capital funding requests. This, again, is something that's, you know, the board is the steward of the taxpayer dollars and is responsible for maintaining the county's assets through the funding of those projects. This, again, is something that's recommended by the Government Finance Officers Association and seeks to align the county with best practices related to capital funding requests and how they come through. Specifically, this policy does a couple of things. It defines what truly is going to be considered as a capital funding request and what would be funded through that. Sometimes there's confusion as to what belongs in a capital line item versus what belongs in another line item. And so this seeks to define that. This also works to help the board have an expectation of what you should be looking at when you're looking at a capital funding request and what information would be helpful to support it. It makes available the funding for the costs for the projects which are $35,000 or less and which are already authorized to be completed by the executive's office. So there's no delay through this policy. It simply is just to guide the board in reviewing those requests. It also requests quarterly reporting and the desire to look at the status of projects, of where they are, how much has been spent, the status of the projects, and the remaining project status of timeline of where it's going to go. Again, this is something that's aligned with best practices. It will provide the board with the information to be able to make decisions related to the funding of capital projects.
And also aligned with the charter's requirement for quarterly reporting, but better than that is aligned with the discussions we've been having with the executive's office and finance about the reporting that we're talking about. So I do not have any other speakers on this, so we have a motion. Oh, Commissioner Leonetti? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Jen and Crystal for all the hard work you've been doing, and I know you had a lot to do with drafting this stuff, and I'll be looking forward to going through it in the next week as we deliberate. So I really want to commend you two and thank you two for your hard work. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you. I don't have any other speakers on here unless I'm missing someone again, so please vote. Commissioner Dujay, you vote? Okay, great. Motion passes 13-0. Item 9C. Need a motion to forward the 2019 appropriations ordinance to full board. Motion by Romano, supported by Leonetti. This is our appropriations ordinance and budget. This would be the time, if anyone's looking at making any amendments to the budget, that they could look to make them. Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move to amend the recommended budget to reduce the appropriation for capital projects from 13.6 million to 9.1 million in order to maintain a 16% fund balance.
Great. We have a second by Commissioner Leonetti. Commissioner Kraft, would you like to speak to this at all?
I think Jen did a pretty great job of explaining it.
Okay. So this is really just following the policies that we put in place. And we, 15 to 20 is recommended. 16 is an amount that Commissioner Kraft has put out there, a 16% fund balance based on all the information that we've received. And I would say that I know that this was put together based on the best case situation that we received as far as all the numbers that we've been receiving from finance. So any speakers on this? If you are, I don't see you on there. Commissioner Kleinfeld?
Just because this is also new, I look forward to hearing the feedback in the next week on it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioners wishing to speak? Seeing none, please. Commissioner Kraft, if you would like to repeat it, or I'm not sure if they have it
Sure,
down.
absolutely. Move to amend the recommended budget to reduce the appropriation for capital projects from 13.6 million to 9.1 million in order to maintain a 16% fund balance.
Thank you. And commissioners, please remember that also included in capital projects has been 1.8 and 1.8 both to F&O and to IT for their line item capital budget. So there is another $3.6 million for capital projects in there. And that's not part of this, what we're talking about. That being said, any other commissioners wishing to speak? Please vote.
Go ahead. I wanted to ask if we could hear from finance on that, if they have any input on that at all.
I think they're probably going to have more input on it during the week when they come and look at the numbers. These numbers are based on the numbers provided to us, and they're just getting the policy on which we're looking at these with, which is also the policy that we take from our auditors, Plant Moran, on how we should be looking at general or our fund balance versus capital, outlay. So I would say that you might have an opinion on it, but it would probably be better to talk to you about it during the week after you've had a chance to really look at these numbers and come back and forth. But if you want, you can have him speak to it. But everybody's been handed this right now, which is what.
I guess that's what I'm struggling with on voting on. Okay. I mean, I'd like to hear what Steve has to say.
Director Smeagol.
I guess I'm at a disadvantage because I don't see it. I don't know what it says. I don't know how it was calculated. I don't know anything.
Exactly, and this is brand new. This is
So I don't know how it was calculated. I'm sure I'm going to have a difference of opinion. I would gather. I gave you a forecast last week that indicates the fund balance is going to be about 25% of expenses at the end of this year. I'm projecting it's going to be around 21% of expenses in 19. We know we don't have we have more expenses in the budget than we spend. I've told you that over and over and over again. So if you look at the 10-year forecast, we hover just about above 21%. So I guess that's the limit of that's where I'm coming from. Commissioner Smith mentioned that we're certainly not presenting a budget to you that in the long term is going to drive fund balance into oblivion. It's not what we're here for. I certainly don't want to be the finance director that causes a downgrade. So, but if you look at the forecast, and I'm more than happy to discuss it in great detail, we're at somewhere around 21%. Now, again, not knowing how Plant Moran calculates fund balance, they may not take into account prepaid expenses. That may be causing some of the difference here. I don't know. So until I get my hands on it and see how it was calculated, unfair for me to really comment. But that's.
And I will just say that we've had a difference of opinion in a way because Plant Moran has but has calculated fund balance this way. Last year we had a discussion about this. In this year, and in the general accepted accounting principles, that's how what Plant Moran follows, and not that there aren't different ways to look at things, but this is the way that we as a board are choosing to look at this. So it's, and there are, we are going to have a meeting next Wednesday before next Thursday's meeting too, Steve, so there might be chance to, obviously then, as a big group, to discuss this after this week's discussions. Sorry. Anything else?
No, I mean, I'm not gonna vote for this until I've had an opportunity to review it. I mean, so I may change my mind later.
That's completely fine. We were moving just to forward this on though, so that's just so you know that. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
As you know, coming into tonight, I expressed 3 days ago before finance that I wanted to see everything in writing, and when it wasn't ready for finance, I didn't want an actual vote on anything that was being worked on. I did think after finance, we were going to get commissioners' intended amendments in writing, and I thought that that would at least be at the table. Commissioner Drillette did put his intent in writing. He did send that in. All the other ones, whatever there is, were formulated either during finance, during the next 2 days, or even previously. Steve, we have an estimate from Jen on the what the fund balance and what would get us to 16 if we were just looking at capital outlay. There's no budget amendments in front of us. There's nothing written down that indicates something for any of us to do. So I want you to understand, as you can see by Commissioner Toko, that's why I thought everything we were doing today was to move forward to the next meeting, because nothing was in writing and nothing was put out in our packet on the website. Everybody, it's no surprise to anybody, I was upset when I came in today about this, because I don't think that's how you do it. I think you put it out there for people to see. So I thought everything was a motion to move forward. Although I knew that there was discussion about doing amendments on that, because it was openly discussed in finance about looking at capital outlay. You know that. You were here making the case the other direction. So I understand her frustration. We don't have it in writing.
Commissioner, this is to move it forward. So just so you know, I know we're voting on different things, but this also gives us a week to discuss these things, change these things, whatever. But at this point, this gives us the best opportunity to get something somewhat solid for the executive and the finance department to look at. Now, I will tell you another thing. Although finance has been very forthcoming with numbers were still rolling in here this week. So to get these things and all these things in writing, to come up with these same numbers, and we're coming up with the newest numbers with the best case scenarios that are just brought in. And normally we don't even get those numbers at this point. And they were kind enough to kind of update us with some of the newest numbers. So timing is what it is. Timing is when we get the information.
You do know this isn't a new argument for me. This has been an argument for me every year since I've been on the board. So this isn't a new argument.
Except normally this argument is we are voting at this moment.
I will give you that you attempted to give us more time this time than we've had in the past. In the past, we show up on the final day and amendments start flying, and you have attempted to at least improve that situation. We're still doing amendments we don't have in writing, but it's certainly better than it was before. Thank you.
Commissioner Drillette.
Well, I think Commissioner Kleinfeld just said what I was about to say, in the sense that my understanding is we are going to have to do a lot better in the budget process and formalizing the process, but that this is indeed an improvement. The fact that we're not voting on the final vote today, that we have an agreement that we've implemented that based on some concerns by the executive about that old process where we just slap the amendments out that day and then we finally vote on them and they have no chance to react to them. It would be unfair to, of course, be doing a final vote today. So this week gap is the built-in, agreed-upon time to give everyone a chance to review it. And while that may not be adequate in the future, we may be able to improve upon that. And I think that Commissioner Kleinfeld is correct that there is better ways. That this was sort of the agreed-upon improvement to at least provide that week for review.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. And
A
also
point of information,
yes.
then maybe it should be a motion to receive and file to discuss at a later date as opposed to voting on it now, because by voting on it now, it means it's being sent on to the next level.
Well, point of
Go ahead.
The point of order is because this is a full board and it isn't another level, it's another full board.
She's right.
Right. And I will say this, too, the policies that we're putting in place and been working on with Crystal and Jen, and even with Steve and Steve, will continue to help this process so that this does get a little more concise in the future and is able to be done a little bit sooner. That's the plan with all of this. So, Commissioner Duje.
Yeah, I kind of understand what, when, where, why, and how here, but I'm not comfortable with forwarding the appropriations ordinance, taking out going from 13.6 down to 9.1, taking out $4.5 million as the beginning point of all this. I think it's open, but voting on this as far as the amendment as presented, I'm uncomfortable with the $4.5 million kick down to get supposedly to 16%. And I haven't seen the numbers for 16%. So I'm not going to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers. Please vote. Motion passes 10-2 with Commissioner Duje and Commissioner Toko voting no. Any other amendments wish to be presented? Commissioner Drollet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make an amendment, a motion that we amend the document that we're forwarding to require that all memberships that the county engages in with outside organizations and associations be reviewed by this board before they're appropriated. And I'd like to speak to that if it's seconded.
Second for that, Commissioner Kraft.
Okay. And
Go ahead,
thank you.
Commissioner Drollet.
Thank you. As many of us are aware, during the budget presentations, there was a component of the budget on page C57 of the executive's proposed budget that included our memberships that the county has in outside associations like the 8 Mile Boulevard Association, the Area Agency of the Aging, Automation Alley, Care House, Steam Gauge, SEMCOG, many of which I was familiar with, but some of which I was unfamiliar with. And I've talked to several other commissioners, and others are a little bit unfamiliar with them as well. The executive made an executive decision to take money that used to go toward a literacy program that's no longer in existence apparently, and redirect that to a different association. But I'm not sure why that association was redirected to, was picked over the Care House or over another association. Long story short, I believe that these associations and memberships have not been reviewed by a board in a long time. I think a lot of them are historically in the budget just because they've been there for a while and they've just been kind of continuously renewed. I believe it's time for us to, as a board, review them, hear from these organizations directly like we do from the DIA or like we do from the Detroit Zoo, and evaluate their value and then make a decision on whether we want to continue them or change them in some way. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and appreciate your support.
Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Okay, first of all, did you say?
C57 was my eyes are deceiving me.
Well,
67.
Yeah, because I've got Public Works.
67, C67.
My eyes were deceiving me.
Okay.
Thank you. Page C67 of the executive proposed budget.
C67, and
Yeah.
here's, this is a different one than that other, what do you call it? Is it general appropriations? The one with the sheriff's cars and stuff. What is that called?
Non-departmental.
Non-departmental.
This is a component of non-departmental.
This is a component of we're going to have to discuss non-departmental a little more next year. But
This is a component.
having said that, specifically with respect to these, here's my issue. We don't do the day-to-day business. We don't know the benefit that these entities provide the county exec's office, and I'm not going to get into the business of making that determination. Not with respect to specific. These are specific agencies and organizations that the county exec's office deals with, and that's why it's a little bit more difficult for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Duje.
Boy, the west side of the building is going wild today. That being said, I can't support this. We're not the ones that, we can review it. If you don't, have you talked to the Office of County Executive as far as what their relationship is with these organizations? Because if they're making the budget amendment and budget, they're budgeting for membership in some of these groups, then there should be a pretty good reason that they could address it. And if they're comfortable with it, I'm very comfortable with them doing what they think is best for not only Macomb County, but for the board and everything. So I can't, I can't support cutting it off or moving it anywhere because it's not our, I don't think it's our purview to do that. So I'm not going to support it. Thank you, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Romano.
And theretofore. Going along with Commissioner Drulette's statement here about some of these affiliations we have, and I have it in front of me, I'm just going to throw off some of these. 8 Mile Boulevard Association, Area-Wide Quality Control, Automation Alley, Stream Gauge. There's a whole bunch of them in here, and we eliminated the literacy program, which was $32,800. Where did the money go? So I don't have a problem with these, but I'd like to know what they are, and I'd like to have the executive office come down and tell us exactly what they are in relationship to Michigan Extension Program. These people know what's going on. They've been here. They're telling us what it's all about, what they want their money for. I'm not saying that all of these departments should come forward, but at least I should know what the heck they do before we get the money out to them or appropriate the money to them. That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Leon, I guess I have a question. So I understand your amendment. You're not saying we're going to take the money away. You're saying we're going to hold it until we have a review on these organizations. If I may, through the chair, have Commissioner Drollet answer.
If I may answer, Commissioner, yes, I am not suggesting that we delete these funds. I'm suggesting we have in our appropriations ordinance that we must review these funds to ensure that they are, to essentially approve them ultimately. And I don't think that, I don't think we're actually in conflict with Commissioner Duje. He's an opportunity to review these.
Right.
There is, I do disagree that with some statements that made that we should have no business looking into these, that this is not any of our business.
And I want to state something, too. Some of these things are over $35,000. I don't know if we enter into a contract with them or something like that, but isn't that something that should come before the board anyway? If it's over $35,000 to join an organization and it's a contract, isn't that part of the contracting policy?
I assume there are contracts with these organizations. That would be, obviously. They're providing services, so we would have contracts.
Uh-oh, here he comes.
So I guess, first of all, if you look down the list, my first comment is there's a number of things that are under 35,000. So regardless of whether we have a contract or not, they're exempt. But most of a number of these are just memberships. They're just memberships. Correct. But if it's under 35,000, correct? I mean, if you know.
Who has the floor? I still have the floor. All right.
Commissioner Leonetti, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for pointing it out. Okay, Leon, thanks for answering your question. And I think it's a good idea. And I will always commend Leon Drollet. We were here a little longer than we wanted to be because of his eyes looking at things and seeing what he can do to improve and stretch our tax dollars. And I think he's raised an issue with this particular issue, unlike the other one that I can support.
Thank you. Commissioner Lucido on the first round. Commissioner Kleinfeld on the first round.
Well, actually, it was the second for me. That's why I didn't want to ask the question, but I didn't get it the way I wanted to. What I was trying to get to, Steve, was do we vote? Have we been voting on the ones over 35? Have we been voting on the Detroit Regional Chamber? SEMCOG, Area Agency on Aging, all of these, and Mac's at 48, and I didn't know if it was 35 or 50 when they were talking. It's gonna end up going over 50, so I thought
I'd
it would
have
come
to
to
do
us.
some research, Commissioner. I'm probably going to say no, because is a membership a purchase, I guess, would be by definition.
It would be, I think we should be voting on the ones that
Yeah.
are over
I mean, if
35.
is a membership a purchase of a good or service? I mean,
Originally up at
Yeah.
Mac, when we were setting the rates, I was thinking 50, and
Yeah.
it's probably gonna end up going over 50, so I thought it would start coming to
right.
the board.
Yeah.
But then when I was
I'm going to
like,
say most likely not, without doing research, but
thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Drollet, did you pull off, or I have, okay.
Well, no, I just wanted to wrap up saying again, I'm not asking for anything radical here. I assume that most of these organizations, we are going to reapprove membership in. I just want to make sure that the board understands what the value is of them, and that we know what they are, and that we have ultimately final say with those for appropriations. I think we have a responsibility to do that.
So I'm going to chime in here. Steve, if you don't mind, I mean, if we're joining these organizations, aren't they providing some kind of service? I know you say, there's been a difference over the years of what constitutes, what's in that $35,000. And that's, I mean, obviously we're trying to, clarify all of that. So, I mean, I guess our position is that anything over $35,000, in an agreement with another agency like that, or, I mean, we are contracting for services at some point, unless, I'm not sure otherwise why we would be contracting with them. But, so, I mean, I know that Commissioner Drollet, especially on the over $35,000 ones, seems to have a point that we should be at least able to look at these. The ones under $35,000, maybe there's a debate there as far as I'm concerned on whether or not, but we still have to appropriate the money for these things. So when it comes down to budgeting and we actually want to, and like I said, maybe just something we push forward to next year where we say, and I hate to keep kicking the can down the road, where we say, hey, if we're going to appropriate this money for these groups, we want to see them first, right? I mean, that might be what we have to do in advance to look at this before we put, that money out. But nonetheless, I guess my question was, I see some of these organizations that we, SEMCOG provide services to us, right? I mean, they give us a service. So, and I don't know, maybe we even approved that already. I don't know if we do or not, but my opinion is that they're providing service over $35,000. We should be looking at them. So,
yeah, I guess we could have a discussion about that. And
Yeah,
we
we
may
will.
just have differences of opinion about what a membership does to a certain organization. Depending on the organization, you may not get a particular service in return. You belong, say, to NACO.
Right.
Do they provide service? They may not, I don't know. Or is it there for, so you can go to the conference or whatever? We belong to the Government Finance Officers Association. Do we have direct service with them? No. It's not anywhere close to 35,000, but if it was, there's a national conference, you get,
well, we
all
always-
those sorts of
yeah,
things. So I think each one might have its own idiosyncrasies that need to be analyzed.
Great. And
Or characteristics, not idiosyncrasies. Idiosyncrasies is probably not a good word. Characteristics.
all right, thank you. I don't see any other speakers on this. We had a motion and a second to forward this to full board next Thursday. What's that? This is a motion to amend. Motion to amend the appropriations, I'm sorry. Who are we waiting? Motion passes 10-2 with Commissioner Dujé and Commissioner Kleinfeld voting no. We are still looking for any amendments. Any amendments? Hey, Commissioner Drollet, I'll keep calling you the
Thank
wrong
you,
name
Mr.
today.
Chair. I would like to offer an amendment to amend the appropriation, or the budget essentially, to eliminate the funding for the MSU Extension Program and redirect that fund to the roads. And if it's seconded, I'd like to speak to it, please.
We have a motion. Do I have a second on that? Support for discussion from Commissioner Kraft. I will take any speakers on this motion.
I'd like to speak to it if I could.
You might speak to your
Could,
own
please.
motion? Yes, Commissioner
Right.
Drolet.
So, we have had a passionate group of citizens come here today and talk emotionally and very, very, with a lot of determination about the value that the MSU extension provides. And what I hear from these folks, the long volunteer hours they put in, their commitment and a care about helping the children of this county and outside this county even, the amount of value that the programs that help kids has provided to the county and to others. I have heard such a great amount of caring about the future of kids and the future of our county and the value of those services that I believe that if the county did not provide was almost $1 million to the MSU extension, that passion, that caring, and that concern, and that love for helping others, I believe that's not going away. And the reasons I believe that are some of the things that I do, that many of us have done, have been attending things like Eagle Scout events, where a young man has attained the status of Eagle Scout, or Girl Scouting events in our districts. And I have listened to and witnessed the unending hours of work, volunteerism, and contribution that things like scouting have meant to those kids, helping them learn financial literacy, helping them become adults, helping them learn leadership skills, helping them learn an amazing number of things. But it's not just scouting. It's a Salvation Army that provides amazing amount of services for helping feed people who are hungry. It's Gleaners Food Bank. It's Forgotten Harvest. It's the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. It's the Rotary Clubs. It's Big Brothers and Sisters. It's an endless number of organizations out there that passionately care about our communities, and that passionately care about children, and that passionately care about feeding the hungry and developing leadership skills, and all these things that we heard about today. Yet none of those organizations gets a dime from this county. Not one dime. Can you imagine the role that scouting has played for young women and young men in our county over the years? How many leadership hours, how many volunteer hours were dedicated without a dime from the county? How much people are fed by Salvation Army programs, Gleaners Food Bank, Forgotten Harvest, how much they have helped our community without a dime, a single dime from us. So when I think about the folks that spoke today at this meeting, I don't believe if we took the money that goes to MSU Extension and put it toward the roads or hiring police officers or public safety, I don't think these people are going away. I don't think that $1 million is what gets them engaged in caring about children or the community. I believe that there will be plenty of ways that they will find to continue to volunteer to help others, just like all these other organizations do. So I believe that we should put the money toward sheriff deputies, we should put it toward roads, and give the MSU Extension the same that we give to Scouting, the Salvation Army, Gleaners Food Bank, Forgotten Harvest, the Boys and Girls Clubs, and all those other organizations that have done so much for our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. We put this up for discussion. We've heard all these people speak about the MSU extension, and there's a lot of worthwhile programs in there. I'm just wondering if Commissioner Drulette would consider adding something to his amendment that would not eliminate the entire MSU extension, but perhaps come up with a percentage number that would still allow them to continue with what they're doing with most of their services, and any additional funds that were eliminated would be put forward to the sheriff's deputies, which we know we need to hire, and we're looking at probably 13 of them, and public safety is tantamount to anything here. And I wonder if you consider maybe not quite eliminating all of it, but maybe a percentage of it. I could go along with that. That's all I have, Chair.
Are you
Thank
offering an amendment to the motion?
You
I would like to make amendment to the motion. If you would consider that, I would consider half and half going to the sheriff's department, which would mean about approximately 500. In fact, I'll make the statement of $500,000 to the MSU extension program, and the balance to be used for the sheriff's department for the hiring of the new deputies. Would
You
you consider that?
You accept that as a friendly amendment?
So my understanding of your amendment, sir, would be that instead of the elimination I'm proposing, you would restore half the funding, and then the rest of the funding would go toward the sheriff deputies that we that the sheriff has requested.
Correct.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Commissioner Kraft, do you have, well, and Commissioner Kraft accepts also, do you have a point of information?
Yes, I do. I'd like to and I apologize to ask Steve, I had some long conversations.
Would you turn your speaker on,
speak? Yeah, I
please,
can't hear you.
Commissioner?
I apologize. Just prior to this meeting, I found a couple of dollars that may help offset this. So, Steve, if you can explain if that could be used to help,
Right, so in the general fund, the funding for MSU is, we provide 5.5 employees, mostly clerical folks. The cost of that, just for round numbers, half and half. So 500,000 of county personnel, county expenses, office supplies, that sort of thing. MSU supplies, I believe it's 6 folks, but anyway, regardless of the number, it's about $500,000 for their staff costs. We pay them $500,000. We pay our employees another $500,000, including all the expenses. There's the $1 million. In addition, there are 2 special revenue funds that are in the budget that have been in operation for a number of years, and those 2 funds have about $400,000 of fund balance in them that we utilize for various purposes. And I believe the staff from MSU put on various general extension, education, financial literacy, a number of other things. And we've been drawing down a little bit every year on those fund balances. There's some that are still left. Whether or not those are restricted in any way, shape, or form, we'd have to do a little research to determine whether or not those monies could be sent back to the general fund, for lack of a better term. And there's about $400,000 there that could possibly be used to fund half of the MSU program for 1 year, and then we would be out of that fund balance. With the caveat that research needs to be done in terms of whether some of that money would have to go back to MSU versus staying with the county.
That being said, we have a list of people to talk, and I'm sure that gave them something more to talk about. Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm both inspired and saddened with public comment today. I'm inspired because we haven't had this many people in our boardroom since I started 2 years ago. And it's your passion for 2 pages of our budget Bible, I call it, is commendable. I'm saddened at our school system because a lot of programs that these kids and these folks came up to speak about, I'm 32 years old. I had those when I was in high school and when I was in middle school. I learned about finances when I was in middle school. I learned about zooplankton when I was on a boat in the Clinton River. Those were all school programs. I didn't have MSU extension programs that I went to after school for those because I did them in school. So I'm extremely torn here because these programs are fantastic and they are what kids should be learning. But should MSU Extension be providing them? Should they have to provide them? No, because our public schools should be providing that. And I'm a graduate of Anchor Bay High School, so I'm born and bred here. And again, we had those programs. So I've been torn about this since public comment started. And for the last, how long have we been here? 2.5 hours. So I was happy to support his motion because I want the discussion, because that's how I feel about it, and I'm curious to hear what other commissioners had to feel about it too. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Duje.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I opposed this on Tuesday when we started with this, when the original amendment was offered. And I opposed it based on a lot of the comments that we heard this afternoon echoed a lot of my concerns. I'd like to say that yes, the schools should provide it, but they aren't. There are a lot of good organizations that Commissioner Drolet mentioned. They aren't providing all the services that MSU Extension is doing either. I think MSU Extension does a tremendous job. I've been to a number of their programs that were very, very well attended by people that really had no idea how to proceed and go on, how to buy a house, how to avoid foreclosure, and so on and so on. But that being said, I can't support this. I don't think it's right. And I think, I said it before and I'll say it again, I think it takes away from a segment of our population, the teenagers to the 30-year-olds, that they may not go vote, they may not be able to go vote, but somebody has to stand up for them and help them along. And after everything's said and done, I think that's what the county board, the county system is supposed to do. So I can't support this. I'll vote against it, and I don't think it's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. I must disagree with my friends, Mr. Leon and Phil Kraft and those, and Joe, that think that it's the right thing to do to arbitrarily or just wipe it out entirely or just throw out an arbitrary number and say, well, just cut it. Means nothing. That $1 million is leveraged to get many more times that amount of money into our county. Not only money, but the positive impacts it has on the county on all various levels. And I don't need to go rehearse it. We just heard a whole variety of things that have come as a result of it. And that leverage is not just money that we're tossing in, it's money leveraged by the institution of MSU. It's professional, skilled knowledge that's being leveraged by volunteers and other grant sources, I might add, that make that $1 million nothing in comparison to the total dollars that come into the county. Macomb County has a $40 million ag a year comes into the county. $40 million a year as a result of agricultural activities that come into Macomb County. Now, not all of it's because of MSU Extension, of course, but you heard one of the persons out there, they play a key supporting role. They partner with the Conservation District, which we're partnering with St. Clair County on, that's brought hundreds of thousands of additional dollars into Macomb County agriculture, as well as water quality issues. And how does all that happen? MSU is right there in the middle of it, helping them out. So the money that we're spending is leveraged and provides many more times the value in terms of dollars, as well as the effect it has, because it's leveraging the volunteer army that we have out there in the county. We all know that this county has a giving heart, and every year I'm amazed when we have the volunteer recognition. There's yet another organization out there volunteering, doing what they can to help their community, and that's great. But MSU Extension is one that's got backed by MSU with their professional help and their grant dollars, and it's worked. It's proven successful on many levels. And I am not going to stand by and arbitrarily throw it out or throw a dollar amount out there and say just to make it look like we're cutting the budget. They're in the best of times in this county too, by the way. You want to cut the budget, there's some other ways we can cut the budget, and we already talked about the capital improvement fund. Maybe we just do a little bit less and maybe not have our roads fixed around here as quickly as we'd like to have them and keep those programs in MSU Extension. $1 million is nothing in that capital improvement fund. But yet you want to cut all these programs out and also toss those employees on the street? I'm sorry, commissioners. I understand, and believe me, I'm there right with you, try to get this budget balance and not dip into fund balance. I'm with you there. But I'm not going to do it on the back of a program that does so much good and leverages so much additional dollars to us. It'd be irresponsible if we did that. And I'm sorry if you disagree with that, but I'm voting against that amendment, any type of amendment that's going to reduce those funding, because it's not necessary now. Maybe in 2010 or 2008, when we were really in a crash, when this county cut 30% of everything in this county and lost a lot of employees and a lot of things. But we're not in a dire situation now either. So I'd ask you for show some restraint and some common sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for the students here in the audience. This is an example of how a deliberative body works. And we all have our own set of skills, and we all have our own beliefs. You know, Commissioner Drolet is excellent at looking at the way of stretching our tax dollars and trying to find ways to save costs. That's an important role for us as commissioners. Commissioner Carabelli is very good at doing that as well. Commissioner Brown has been here a very long time, and he just gave a very passionate speech. He's a Republican, but he sounded like a Democrat to me, and I'm a Democrat, all right? But that's the way it works, and that's what we do here.
Me now. Come on now.
I know you're already upset, and I'm with you on this one. But, you know, we have to remember one thing, and this is going to be, we're at budget season. We're all freaking out because we're looking at Excel spreadsheets. We're thinking, where can we save money? And everybody's doing the best we can here to do what's right. And one thing we have to keep in mind, it's not our money. It's the taxpayers' money, okay? And these people pay taxes for things that they want. And this program, without doubt, is something that the taxpayers want. Now, I get it. There's going to be commissioners here that say, well, we also have to put police on the street, okay? Now, I'm not going to pick on the sheriff, but let's think about this for a second. Tax dollars, and Marv's going to hate me for this, but tax dollars for police are fine, and they're important. But that's a reaction. Putting more police on the street is something we have to do, but it's a reaction to failing programs in our schools, failing programs in our communities. Look at this young man right here who came up here from East Detroit. He says there's a program, a 4-H program in East Detroit. Now, I'm not going to pick on this young man, but let's say there wasn't no program in East Detroit. Let's say he took a different path, more police. This young man's trying to be part of his community. He's trying to do what's right, and that's because this program exists. This is a program where our tax dollars go to something positive, not necessarily reactive. And so I think we need to think that way, because when you put tax dollars to something positive, we got farm, we got garden, we got water here being taken care of, we got kids getting involved in their communities, you will never be able to measure the success rate of those programs. But what we can measure is, geez, how many more police do we have to get? If we cut programs like this, how many more people go through the system and decide now we need more and more police? That's reactionary. I like spending my tax dollars on something that I see that is positive and leads to something greater. I'll also spend money on the police too, because I know it's an important necessity. But I think we get more bang from our buck from this $1 million, like Commissioner Brown said, and we go forward with that. So Leon, I do admire you. I do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure working with you here, and you have your skill set in other areas. We just talked about an amendment that I am going to support you on, but I cannot support you on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you. What I said 2 days ago, there was no way I would be okay with the gutting, and I talked about 10% or 20% at the most, so that you work your way into it, because we've got that contract issue out there. But I don't think there should be any lecturing going on around here, because 4 people voted against that downtown project. 2 of them are sitting here, and neither one of them has lectured anybody. And the other 2 are gone. And there's a bunch of new people up here that weren't around for that. So now we're cutting capital projects, which I think we need to do, but we may be cutting things that we need when we spent $65 million, and we didn't need this room. It's beautiful, I love it, but we didn't need it. So let's not lecture each other, since I just lectured you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you for the lecture.
Okay, so let's get down to business here. Number 1, there was a motion, and then there was an amendment. And instead of being an amendment, it became a friendly amendment, which we shouldn't do. But so we need clarification on the motion, and then I got a couple of budget questions. So what's the actual wording on the motion, since we've played around with it here?
Go ahead.
To reduce the MSU extension monies by $500,000 and use the additional money that was granted to them to be placed either in the Sheriff's Department, which I originally suggested, and if that's not possible, to have it back into the general fund.
Okay, which would be the same thing, because if we approve everything that the sheriff is doing, that money's coming out of the general fund balance. Exactly. So if we put that money in there, then it's the same amount will end up in the general fund balance, because it'll just be that much less. So either one of those turns out to be the exact same thing. So, Steve, you've got C-48, which is the MSU extension. And I think if I heard you correctly, because I was wondering why full-time wages and part-time wages weren't going up every year, but supplies and services were. And if I understood you, that's because that's where our employees are located?
No, so the full-time wages,
They're not going up.
no, what happened was, I can't remember which month, but during the course of this year, there was at least one position that was transferred from county payroll to MSU payroll. Was it two? I can't, but there was at least one, but probably two. I guess I'll rely on Commissioner Drollett's memory better than mine on this particular issue. So we transferred two positions from county payroll to MSU payroll. And the bulk of the supplies and services line item is the contract with MSU. That whole line item's
Okay, so the full-time wages are our employees.
correct.
Okay, which is generally speaking where county government goes up in costs because we have healthcare costs rising, there's pension,
Correct.
there's a 2% raise here and there. But that's not what's been happening with MSU Extension. What's been happening with MSU Extension is the supplies and services line item is the line item that's been going up every year, except we haven't had a contract every year to approve those increases. Am I correct?
That I don't know. I don't believe so. We have
Commissioner Gillette, we
contracts,
didn't, when's the last
but I
time
don't
we
know
had a
if we brought 'em
contract?
here.
Commissioner, my understanding is that we signed our 2018 contract with the MSU Extension sometime this past August, and it lasts till December. So we signed a contract very late in the year.
So, so it was in 2016, it was close to 894,000. In 2019, it's 997 is the recommended. So, excuse me, that's over $100,000. And what I did was I took 2018, the amended, which is the same as the adopted, and just say you froze it and didn't do anything else. From 2018 to 2019 is a $33,100 increase. So I took that. Now, you talked about money, D11 I found that yesterday. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I have a cold. And I got 114 in that fund balance. But you talked about another couple hundred, and I don't know where that is.
That is, I can find it for you. It's a September year-end fund, and it's on page D37.
All right.
There's about 225.
$225? Right.
Yeah, 225.
I see it. So if you take the 225 and you just said we'll just freeze this spending, well, you take the 114. So you're at you're at 339. So if you just froze it from last year to this year, which I don't know why when we're negotiating, we're not having discussions about this. So then that was, what did I say, 33. So now you're at 372. So what if we just, if we can use those funds, you said you're,
I got to do a little looking and a little research to see a number of those funds were generated through user fees, whether or not those kind of belong back to MSU if we were to eliminate the entire, I don't know that.
so what I would like to do is I'm inclined to vote no on those but issue a new motion because I don't want to pile an amendment on top of a friendly amendment on top of a motion. But what I would like to do this year, until we can sit down and do the negotiation of the contract in the proper way and take a look at the things that are in the contract, because that was one of your issues. Clearly, the 4-H is extremely popular. The master gardening is, we should be looking at those. So if we did that, and we took, I was at 372. So if we just went 375 as the reduction with the understanding of we'll try to use those funds, and if you can find out between now and next week, the only cut we're actually making is the growth, minus $3,000, if we do that.
So if I understand you, as I understand what you're saying is, use the $375,000 of fund balance to then basically pay for part of the operation. and the-
339.
Or 339.
Right, and then you got the 33,000 in growth. So we say, look, we're not
Yeah,
gonna
the-
approve the growth.
Right, the 33,000 in growth, I believe we've built in a 3% increase on the MSU contract itself. So some of that 33 is growth,
So-
you know,
so we don't
inflation on
know-
on the contract with MSU.
Okay, so we don't necessarily know that 3% is gonna happen anyway.
I don't know if we know for sure, but it's been kind of going up around that every year anyway.
Well,
But we can look into, we don't have a contract signed for 19, so we've built in,
so if
An
we,
assumption.
right, so if we go 375, we're at the growth and 3,000, if we can use those funds. And
we
in the
can use 'em.
meantime, between now and next week, you can find out if we could use those funds. Okay. That's not out there yet. That's if this, we'll see, that's what my thought process is. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Commissioner Lucido? Well, yes, well, we can let, Commissioner Lucido.
Should I begin? Good. Shuffling. Okay. Thank you guys for coming. Great having you. I just wanted to comment that the forum that we had today, I think, was great. I really, when I thought of 4-H, I thought of pigs and hogs and, you know, whatever. And Leon had brought to our attention things like Booze Cruise and you know, Day of the Dead and things like that. I had really no idea of what really went into MSU Extension and the education behind it and some of the really great programs that they offer. So last meeting really felt like if we could do a cut or eliminate, I was in support of it without knowing these things, because I felt it was very important to approve our sheriffs, or our deputies. But I've changed my mind, and I feel like this is a program that I would not, in good conscience, cut. So thank you for the hard work you put into this. I know we're all trying to make cuts and balance things, but I need to support it. As a teacher for the last 23 years, educating people is important to me, and I feel like this is a program worthwhile. And yeah, I do feel like maybe some of the program, you know, components may be duplicated in other areas, and maybe we could work on consolidating those things. But there are some programs they offer that other places don't, that, you know, the Great Lakes, that several people spoke to, what do they call it, GLOP, or, yeah, and the 4-H that I feel like should not be cut, so, thank you.
Commissioner Romano.
On the second round.
Well,
Thank you. I'll make it short. No, I'll make it short.
Consider
You
your,
know, first of all, I just want to make a statement here. I don't want to throw anybody on the street. As my fellow commissioner mentioned, I want to throw some people on the street. I don't want to do that. And there are duplicate programs, as Commissioner Drulette has mentioned and has stated. And I guess my question is, there's many counties here in the state. And from my understanding, probably 90% of them contribute to the MSU Extension Program. And I've asked this question from almost every commissioner, and how much money is that in total? And I can't get an answer because nobody knows. Unless Mr. Schmiegel does. I didn't think so.
say that again?
Sure. How many, the money that all the rest of the counties contribute to the MSU Extension Program, how much is that?
Oh, I don't know.
Thank you. So when we suggested taking 50% of that out, there is still 50% of that money from what, or approximately that amount, that has been found that can be added to that program, possibly because that money has been sitting there fallow for a number of years. So adding that 5, or those 4 or 5 that's in there, to the 5 that I suggested that we give them, would still appropriate very close to the amount of money that they're requested, and everybody would be on the same level. So that's where I'm coming from. I just want to make sure that people understand where I'm coming from. Thank you, Chair.
thank you. Commissioner Carabelli, I will give, these guys had a point of information and an amendment, so I'm going to give Commissioner Carabelli on the list. Mark.
Thank you. Great discussion, kind of in the direction that Commissioner Kleinfeld had mentioned. Steve, I guess where I'm leaning towards this is this. If we left, and hear me out, commissioners, if we left MSU intact, and we took that $400,000 in those funds at $100,000 piece to cover the deputies. That's not a $500,000, it's $400,000, but it's leaving MSU intact. And if those funds are available to replenish the general fund to help offset the cost of, and by the way, it's 17 deputies, not 13. 17 deputies we're talking about at $105,000 apiece at $1.7 million plus, $1.8 million. When you look at that, it's like we gotta come up with something somewhere. So if we left that intact this year and took those reserve funds to help offset that cost, if they can be moved, and you would have to let us know prior to our next meeting, I could support that. If that can be done. Now, I didn't make a motion on this, similar to what Commissioner Kleinfeld was saying, but I could support leaving it intact, taking those funds back to help offset the cost of the deputies. I could support that, but I don't know if that can be done.
Correct.
That's what we're going to check on?
Right.
So
That's
we're
what I
gonna-
need to do. I need to touch base with the folks at MSU. I need to look a little bit more historically within my office in terms of how those funds were generated over the course of the, I don't know, number of years. Those programs have been around for a long, long time. So I know what you're saying, though. Just take.
And we'll expect, well, hold on, we have more people to speak, and then someone's going to have to do something. But Commissioner Sauger?
I almost forgot what I was going to talk about. First of all, I'm wondering, I thought the schools were for this program, but I didn't see a single person from any school in the whole county here speaking in behalf of these kids. Not a one. That surprised me. The second thing is, Don Brown would remember this. A few years back, we had a couple of the buses take a bunch of our commissioners up north to the farms to see what the farmers do with the 4-H crew. And it was a great trip, and we enjoyed that. I'm not a farmer, I'm a city guy, but I learned a lot about what farmers can do with fertilizer and whatnot, okay? So I'm against cutting that 4-H program, but I'm really concerned why the schools weren't here. And it's big in the schools, I heard that. But not a single superintendent, principal, or no one was here to speak on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chairman.
Commissioner Toko.
Thank you. When I chaired the Community Services Committee, I attended almost every one of the MSU programs and watched and observed it and participated in it. And I see the value in the MSU programs. And I know that they provide a very valuable service, and in a very short period of time, they've assembled almost a full room of people within 24 hours to come and passionately speak about their programs. What I don't know today is what making any cuts to the program would do on a long term and going forward. We don't really know how many employees. We don't really know what's grant funds, and Steve can't tell us today how it would affect the budget going forward. I think that unknowingly making cuts is not a good idea. And I think we need to take a look at what the fallout from making these cuts would be. Our finance department can't tell us, and I don't think we should just start shooting from the hip, coming up numbers, $1 million, $500,000. I can't support this at this time. I appreciate, Leon, the work that you've put into this, but I can't support blindly making cuts to a program that I know is a very valuable program. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith, on the first round. I agree with you, Commissioner Toko. I think that though I believe this program and probably 30 other programs that the county connects with probably could use some looking at and maybe a little tightening up on which services we need as a county and which ones we don't. But we haven't done that yet. And you know, to sit here right now and pick a number and you know, try to figure out what we're cutting, I don't think that this is the way to do it. I think similar to what Commissioner Drolet mentioned with these organizations that we're joining, we might need to get a group of these organizations that we fund that we have no idea really what they do, and we got a great learning lesson tonight on what you do, and bring them before us. Maybe we have, assuming we're all here next year, maybe we start with a committee with the executive's office and us and finance, or you know, whoever it might be, but for sure to hear what all of the services are that are being provided for the dollars that we're giving to a lot of organizations. And we give a lot of money to a lot of organizations that we have no idea, just like these service organizations, what they do and if some of these contracts have been going on so long that sometimes they get a little stale. So I agree the idea of looking into these. I just don't agree with the idea of cutting at this point without having a process where we look at everybody equally and decide where we're pulling money from when we're trying to save money. That being said, if there is a way to get this money, and obviously by not making any motion today or not voting on any motion, everything stays the same to next week. We get answers from our finance director, and then we can make our decision from there. So that might be the way to go. I'm not sure what everybody wants to do, but I say by doing nothing, it moves it forward, gives us a chance to get a little more information on this money that's sitting on the side. So one way or another at this point, I will not be voting to eliminate nor reduce any money in this program. However, I will certainly be interested next year in looking into the program on a little more critical note, but not just your organization. The reason being that it's been explained by Commissioner Leonetti and many of you that we are the budgeting legislative body of the county, and we have to look at these things critically. And so that's where I'm standing right now. Steve, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something in response to Commissioner Toko's question. So I think it's fairly clear if you were to eliminate the MSU program in its totality, you could look at it a couple of different ways. One, the general fund savings would be close to $1 million right off the top if all that went away. Mm-hmm. There's also those fund balances we've been talking about. Those have the possibility of maybe coming back to the general fund as a one-time revenue. So it's possible that the general fund could realize a benefit, if you will, of about up to 1.3 million, depending on the nature of those fund balances. So,
okay,
just
yeah,
kind of clarify.
Sure, but you have a little more information.
Yeah,
obviously next week.
Right,
Commissioner. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. If you.
Point of information to that point. If it's removed and we use the special pot that Commissioner Carabelli's talking about, that's a one-time fix.
correct.
Correct.
So
Yes, the fund balances are a one-time issue.
So then we don't know, I mean, doing that today would affect years in the future. I mean, if it's eliminated, it's gone, and we use a one-time.
Correct. I'm just commenting on the financial impact to the general fund. I'm not.
It's understand it, so that the extra money found would be a one-time fix. It might be something you're considering to drive us into next year to look at this better, and then possibly refund it through the general fund, or leave it, at some different level. That's what I understand your what you're looking at.
Yeah.
My opinion at this point is to just leave this alone until at least next week before we even know if that's a possibility, because we don't know that that's a possibility. Commissioner Drollet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the special fund that's been found in the budget with that, several $100,000 is a question that hopefully Steve can get answered for us by next week. I don't think that it should necessarily, we need to get that answer regardless of what happens on this amendment. So if the amendment passes, the amendment fails, ultimately we still need to know what that money is for, how it can be used.
Agreed.
We can look at it then. So I think we should, I appreciate everyone's comments on this. I think we should just vote on the amendment and then hear back from Steve next week to find out if we want to do anything with that, what the possibilities are with that fund.
Great. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Just that I'm not going to make a follow-up motion if this fails, and the reason is both of those funds are being drawn down, and I suspect he's going to come back with something that's going to make whatever motion I would have made moot. So I won't make a follow-up motion until he has a chance to look into those two funds, because both of them are drawing down every year, which means they're being used for something.
Great.
And just one thing, Commissioner Kraft, do you know that your school district wasn't partnering with MSU when you took those programs? Okay, thank you.
Speaking of Commissioner Kraft, you're up.
Yeah, I think it might have been through the ISD, but I had come into this with the intention of, I supported Commissioner Drollet's motion, and I wanted to hear more discussion on it. And after hearing pretty much every commissioner's take on it, I appreciate Commissioner Carabelli and Commissioner Kleinfeld's ideas on that. And because of that, because I would like to have more information from Steve about those funds, I'm going to be voting no, because I would like to have that time to see where those funds are, how much they are, what they could cover. And in that sense, we could also look at the contract we have with MSU Extension and look at the services they provide and if the dollars could match up to that. So I just wanted to let Commissioner Drillette know that before I voted and surprised him. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Romano.
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Kraft. I will withdraw my amendment to the motion, and I'll wait to see what happens when we get the information on where that money's at. So I think you just withdrew your support. I just withdrew my amendment.
The amendment is withdrawn. The original motion
Yes,
would stand.
The original motion's on the floor then to completely eliminate. Right.
Unless I withdraw it.
Correct.
Which I will do.
Right. The support for Commissioner Drolette's motion has been withdrawn. The amendment has been withdrawn. If we don't have a second, then we don't have a vote and everything moves forward. Is there a second for Commissioner Drolette's motion? Seeing none, the motion dies for lack of support. Are there?
Will you just explain that to the audience quickly?
Okay, so as it stands right now, everything is moving forward with as the recommended budget on MSU Extension, which is a complete funding of the program. It is still going to be up for discussion, or available for discussion next Thursday at Thursday's full board meeting at 2 o'clock. Great. So are there any other amendments to be brought forward for the budget? Any other amendments? All right. I see no other amendments. So we have a motion to forward the appropriations ordinance as amended to the November 8th full board. So let's just have that motion. Yes. Commissioner Leonetti, Commissioner Kraft. But it wasn't as amended.
No, they amended the original.
Okay, great. All right. So we do have an original motion that will take it as amended. So please vote. To forward it to full board next Thursday, November 8th at 2 p.m. Where are we at? Yes. Where are we at? Motion passes 12-0. Item 10, proclamations. Anybody motion to move them in their entirety? Second by Duge, supported or made by Carabelli. All in favor, please vote. Motion passes 12-0. We ready? All right, 12-0. Item number 11, closed session. We will, Sergeant at Arms, we will move into closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody has to